Great. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the author of four novels, including Just Stay Away, Pike Island, A Necessary Act, and his latest, which just came out yesterday, Silent Creek. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Tony Wirt. Tony, how the heck are you?
Good. How you doing, man?
Good. We you kind of have a heart out that I should have asked you about
No,
earlier. So
it's fine.
I don't want to waste too much time. So let's get into it. I found that one of the things I always like asking writers is if they know, like, do you remember the very first creative thing you ever did? Like if you were if you were a kid or if you were in middle school, high school, do you remember the very first creative thing you ever did?
Yeah, absolutely. So my elementary school had this like magazine or whatever you would want to call it, yearbook kind of thing called the Creative Courier. And I remember being in first grade and the school librarian came to tell us about it. And she basically said you can write stories, you can write poems, you can like draw pictures, kind of anything an elementary creative type or even not that creative kid could do. And you kind of submit, and I remember them saying not everything gets in. Like you had to, you have to be picked. You have to submit and get accepted. And I don't know why. I just thought that was really cool. So what I chose to submit was my thoughts on the movie Airplane 2. I wrote like a little, like not a review, but just like a recap. And then I drew a picture of a space shuttle because that was the one where they're on a space shuttle and not an airplane. And somehow got in. And like that was, I just thought was the coolest thing in the world. And the thing I remember about it was going up to my first grade teacher, like at the front of the class, they'd given us time, like after the presentation, we got half hour to work on whatever or something. And I went up to her and I asked her how to spell the word sequel. I remember this. And she was like, why? And I explained to her and she just kind of went like, okay. and, and that was my first publication credit right there.
So what was the very first, do you remember the very first, like, more original thing that you came up with?
I wrote a lot. So my parents brought up not that long, like in the last year, like I got a box of stuff from the basement. And I remember I used to write stories around that time a lot. And I found like two or three of these. It was just notebook paper stapled together, maybe 8 pages of like, and like probably like three little stories I'd written. I remember one was called The Luckiest Millionaire. It was about a kid who was super lucky and he kept winning like contests and like whatever and would get like sports cars and boats and he was buying all this whatever a little probably 8-year-old kid would think is the greatest thing in the world to spend your money on. And I was looking through it and I showed my daughters that and they were just laughing at the, shocking it wasn't that good. But they were saying like these are like your rookie cards, like if you're an athlete. This is the first, this is your first book. Unnecessary Act isn't your first book. This is the happiest millionaire, or the luckiest millionaire, whatever I call it. That's your first book. So if I ever get big, maybe we'll like auction it off for charity or something.
Wait, so how old were you when you wrote that one?
That probably, I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, I don't know. Like, I don't remember writing it. I remember writing all kinds of like there was three in that box. I probably did 50 of them when I was a kid, or like first,
Yeah.
second grade, third grade area. So I don't specifically remember writing that story. I just remember doing that, and it was kind of a kick to read through it a little bit.
Oh, I bet. So did you like what were you reading or watching? I mean, like, why did you find yourself being so creative and telling stories? Because I feel like as writers, this is our life, so we just feel like this is normal. But honestly, it's not very normal to want to just be by yourself and get lost in your own world and tell stories. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, like, do you know like who you were reading at the time or what you were reading? Like what was that inspiration?
I was really big into the around that time in the 80s, they came out with like an updated Hardy Boys books. I had
The new generation or something?
it was called
Was that
Case
it?
Files. They were Hardy
Okay,
Boys
yeah.
Case Files, and I read the I bet I had 75 of them on the shelf of my room. I loved them, and they were bananas. If you go back, like in that literally in that same box my parents sent, there was a few of those in there. I was looking through. These high school kids are like fighting off terrorist bombers, and like it is hardcore. Like, and I'd read like my dad had Hardy Boys books. I remember at the time he like gave me some of his old ones, and that was like, the case of the old sawmill. And I would read, I was like, this is boring. Like they're not shooting anybody. Nobody's. I can't remember what Joe Hardy's girlfriend, her his girlfriend's name was. She dies in a car bomb in the first chapter of the first one. It was insane. But for a at that point, 10-year-old boy, oh my God, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I I remember also trying to write my own version of like I'm sure it was Joel and Freddie, Marty or something like it could not have been more of a carbon copy, but I remember trying to write those. And I even said like I wanted to get those published somewhere and they didn't get published. Probably for the best. Those might be still in
So
my maybe in a different box in my parents still in my parents' basement. I don't know.
yeah. So all right. So let's talk about it. So A Necessary Act
Mhm.
was I guess your first published novel. Now, was that your
Yes,
first was that just your first published novel or like your first novel?
that was the first novel I ever wrote. So, when I graduated from college, I worked at the University of Iowa in the athletic department, doing sports information, basically PR for uh, various athletic teams and stuff. Um, and at the time, I like we were, I'd be with the field hockey team going to Ann Arbor. It's an 8-hour bus ride from Iowa City. So I would, I've always been a reader. So I would just read on those bus rides. We'd be going to Ohio State. We'd be in just long, not the days of charter planes and stuff. So I would read a lot. And then at the time, one of the things that I'd always wanted, like I said, I've been trying to write in my head. I'd been thinking I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, but it never seemed like a, a real career path kind of a thing. But what I realized after a few years of travel is like, well, heck, maybe I've got these long bus rides and a laptop. I can maybe start dinking around with something. So I kind of started just trying to write some short stories, stuff like that. Eventually, I met my wife and got married. She was a surgical resident at the University of Iowa. So she was doing her residency. We knew that obviously we ended up getting married during her residency. We knew that when she was done with her 5 years, we were moving to wherever her job was because surgery pays a lot better than athletics communication. I'll tell you that. Fewer t-shirts, but money wise, it's a little better. Um, so I always knew I was leaving that career at that point. We had our first kid and then my wife did a fellowship in Omaha, Nebraska. So we moved from Iowa City to Nebraska, and we are going to be there for a year. And that's when I thought, well, we've got a kid. I don't have a job. Like, no one's going to hire me for a year, knowing we're leaving anyway for anything decent. So I was like, what if I stay home with the kid, and then I could actually try to write a novel because I didn't know how kids worked. I had a 6-month old, and I was like, yeah, she'll sit in the thing, and I'll just be. So obviously nothing happened that whole year. But then we moved back to Iowa City when she got a full-time job after residency, and that was when I was like, kids were getting a little older, and I was like, well, maybe that is actually something I can try once they're not just like trying to get themselves killed 24 hours a day. So I did a lot of nap times. I would try writing. I would try writing. Eventually, we had another kid, so that kind of slowed things down again. But it got to the point where one kid was in preschool, and then I hired a college kid to come over once a week to watch our second child, so I could go to the coffee shop for 3 hours or whatever when the older one was at preschool, and that was my writing time. I had 3 hours a week on Wednesdays, and I would like think all week, marinate everything, and then as soon as I got there, I would just pour out as many words as I possibly could because I knew that was the only time I had. And then as our kids got older, you start getting a little more time. So, and but that was how a necessary act was written. We ended up moving up to Rochester, Minnesota, where we are now. Uh, and once both kids got into kindergarten, then it was, oh, now I have time. And that's when I finished that unnecessary act. And that was what, 2016? Uh, and that was just kind of the
Well,
start.
for people who aren't aware, can you just kind of give us a quick overview of what that book's about?
So that book is about a high school kid who is fascinated kind of with serial killers and does a lot of research in the psychology of it, um, and realizes that one of his classmates is showing all the signs of being a future serial killer, and it's what he does with that information, basically.
Do you remember how many drafts it took you before you got what became the final draft?
So for that one, I did, let's see, went through four drafts, I believe. Um, and then in that time, I queried agents left and right, got in with a lot of them, had a very good hit rate in terms of getting like a full request, but they all passed. So after a year, I ended up self-publishing that one. And it did for a self-published book in a non-romance self-published book in you know the 2016 area. It did well. I mean, it sold decently. Um, and then I wrote my next book, and I really debated whether I was going to self-publish that one again or if I was going to try to find an agent. And because, like I said, I had such a good experience self-publishing, and I kind of felt like this time around I knew the ropes better. I strongly considered that, but then it was just like something in the back of my head was like, nah, I still want to give traditional publishing a go and see what happens. So I queried that one quite a bit, kind of the same scenario. I was getting a lot of requests, but not getting any hits until finally I landed my agent with that one after about 6, 7 months, I think, of querying. And then
And
that
then
book went
from,
on. Yep.
yeah, like on submission, then once you went on submission, how long did it take for that one to get snapped up?
So the first book died on sub.
Oh,
Hmm.
interesting. And
Yeah.
that, to be clear, and I could be wrong, but for some
Yep.
reason I'm feeling like that one was Pike Island, which was the
Yes.
second one that came out for me. Okay.
Yep. So that book died on sub, which is a major bummer, obviously, to anyone that's been
Mhm.
in that situation. So we just decided, well, I'll write something else, and I wrote "Just Stay Away," and then that one sold. Um, and then they were immediately like, "Well, what else do you have?" And I was like, "Well," my agent was like, "We got this one," and they're like, "Looks great, we'll take it." Although they passed on it the first time, which was funny.
Yeah, I mean,
Same
once you're in
editor.
with a publisher, it's one of those things where, yeah, they're
Sure.
willing to work on books they might not have given you, at first glance.
Well,
So
and
that
I'll also
happens.
tell I tell this story to a lot of querying and submitted authors and stuff about how much of timing it is because when we gave them Pike Island to be book two, my current editor, she was joking with me about it. She was like, she goes, I like this book more than I like Just Stay Away. I was like, how did I pass on it? And I was like, I don't know, but you did. And I had actually looked into it a little bit, and before we gave it to them, I thought, well, shoot, let me look and see what the rejection email was in case they're saying like, oh, we love it except for this one character is blonde and we hate blonde people, or whatever. Like I can change that before we give it to them. Um, and that was the one I didn't have an email. My agent sent me all the submission rejections. That was the one we didn't have one for, and it was a pass from Thomas and Mercer. I can't send you I can't send you the rejection because we were talking about another client's book in it as well. And then what we basically figured out was one of my agent friends, she had sold a book that was kind of in a similar vibe right around the same time. And
Yeah.
when I asked my editor, I was like, "Do you think it was just that you're like, wait a minute, a Lark Group client with a kind of a small town creepy thrillery thing. We just have one of those." And she was like, "Oh yeah, that's probably exactly it." She's like, "Because I don't remember reading it at all." And she's like, "If I would have read it, I would have bought it, but I don't think I even looked at it." And She didn't because she had just bought something kind of similar and didn't want to have two of the same thing. And I get it. And that's just, it's hard to hear when you're querying or on submission about when people say, oh, it's just timing. Don't worry about it. It's not all merit. It's not, but I mean, it's an example right there. It was bad timing the first time, timing worked the second time.
No,
There you go.
it's true, and some writers don't like to hear it, but a lot of
Well, it's
publishing
tough
comes down to luck. It all
for
comes
sure.
down to being to the right editor at the right house at the right time with the right
Mhm.
book, because you will get on submission can be brutal, where you will get like even assuming you even get some rejections, because nowadays a lot of editors, it feels like, don't even respond because they get so
Mhm.
influxed with
Sure.
submissions. But sometimes it's like it seems very nitpicky. They're like, well, again, like you said, like the character, like, I wish there was someone like this. And it's like, well, yeah, that's something that can easily be fixed.
Sure.
Like it's called,
Yeah.
like that's the editing process. But it's one of those things. It's just, you gotta, again, they just have to really, because it's not just the editor. It's not like in the old days where if an editor loves a book, they buy it, it's done. Now they got to
Mhm.
take it to acquisitions, the whole marketing
Yep.
thing, and they might look at past sales, and yeah, it's really a cluster, and it's
There's a
it's one of those
million
things where I
factors.
always tell people, like publishing is just awful. Like it's an awful business. The only reason you stick with it is because you love writing.
Right. It's tough. And like it's like you don't want to like when you're a querying author or something, you don't want to hear it because it's something that's completely out of your control. It's not you like to think if I write a great book, it will get there. And that just isn't always the case. There's a million factors. And I always talk about it with I look at publishing like a lottery and everyone gets you get tickets or entries, whatever you want to call it, for certain things. Being a good writer, you get a bunch of tickets for that. If but you get stuff like if you happen to be writing in a genre that's about to hit, because if you can't write to it, if vampires are hot now, you can't submit vampire stuff because that's all done. You got to submit the next, so if you hit the timing right of like, oh, I've got a story about farming and that's going to be the next big thing. Well, then there's some tickets you get. Just having time, having financial. Like in my case, my wife's a surgeon. When I was on submission, I could have never sold a book. My kids are still going to college. They still got clothes, whatever. That that's tickets right there. I could devote my full time job to writing when a lot of people can't do that. And that's a privilege right there. And that's more tickets for me, and you can win with one ticket and you cannot win and have 100 of them. It's just it gives you a better chance, but that doesn't even guarantee anything. So
Yeah.
it's hard. And you look at someone who's like, how did that person? Oh man, they came from nothing. They had no advantages and they made it. Yep, they did because they're awesome and that's great. But they part of them they got lucky too. Everyone gets lucky at some point of this. You can't just it's not just the writing. The stars have to align for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, quite honestly, even the number of writers who actually write full time because they sell enough copies and make enough money is very, very minimal. I
Yes.
know a writer who often joke like, most writers who manage to write full time is someone who happens to have a spouse who is able to work and then,
Hmm.
provide health. I mean, especially if you're in the
Yep.
United States, you need
Yeah.
someone who has health
Healthcare.
benefits to have health
Yep.
care. And yeah, it's definitely a very tough job. But between, A Necessary Act and then those other books, you had another book, Opal versus the Woods. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So after I wrote A Necessary Act, uh, and I published it myself, and I was just kind of looking for like a palate cleanser uh, before I started my next big thing, and I ended up writing a story for my daughter Paige. She was in second grade at the time, so I wrote this kind of middle grady book about. Uh, so my grandpa had a cat that my daughters adored, and it got out one day in the middle of winter up here, very harsh winter. Thing was fat, declawed. We are just like, oh, and it didn't show up for a few days, and they were like, oh, that's the deadest cat there ever was. There's no way that cat survived. Like 4 months later, she came home. And like my kids were thrilled. It was everything. And so I wrote a story about like what Opal did while she was gone. Just kind of a little story for her. And then when I was done, what I realized was having self-published my previous book, I was like, man, I can just like mock up a cover and do some quick layout and throw it up on Amazon so she can have a hard copy. Just buy one. And so that's what I did. I I made it. I got her a copy and she loved it. And then she was like, "Oh, I want to give it to my classmates." So I kind of kept it on Amazon and we ordered 25 copies for a class. And then like it was weird because I'm not saying it sold a lot, but people started buying it, and it was just like a little weird, funny side project, and like it's got reviews from people I don't know, and like it's every now like I'll look at my Amazon portal and like every now and then it's like, oh man, I sold like 5 Opal versus the Woods last month. That's kind of crazy. So I keep it up just kind of for fun. Although I did say like the new kind of one of the big things in publishing is people acquiring backlists from people. So I have told my editor at Thomas and Mercer that if they are interested, I'm willing to negotiate on Opal versus the Woods.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that book, from what I could tell by at least the look inside, that was written in first person, whereas the rest of your novels are all third person. Correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong.
Yes, that's true.
What was I mean, do you like, have you tried writing any of your other more adult novels in first person, or are they just like, I guess the question is like, do you just, when you're sitting down to write a project, do you, in the
Hmm.
back of your head, know, okay, this is going to be third person, or with Opal versus the Woods, like this, I'm going to write this in first person. I mean, or is that something where you'll start maybe in first person or third person, and then a couple chapters in, feel like it's just not feeling right, and then go back?
Yeah, I've tried first person a time or two for you know real novels, for the stuff I do. And it doesn't flow from me. I don't know what it is. It always comes out third person for me. So it's been a minute since I've actually tried, but it's I'm a third person writer. I think it's just that's what sounds natural to me, and I don't mind. Like I'm sorry, read plenty of first person books. I've no like I don't have anything against it. It's not like I don't like it, but for some reason when words come out of me, they're in third person. So that's what I've stuck with.
Yeah. And when the words are coming out of you, based on what you had discussed before about going to the coffee shop, are
Mhm.
you just, again, I always hate the terms, but are you more of a pantser versus a plotter, or do you outline kind of the book ahead of time, or like how do you approach it? And has that changed since a necessary act?
Well, for a necessary act, I had to be a little bit more of a plotter just because, like I said, since I had only that was a kind of a unique writing scenario. Like I said, where I'm at a keyboard for 3 hours a week, I had to have everything kind of, I have stuff written down of like, and just like laying in bed, I would be almost drafting. So when I got there, it was kind of
Which, yeah, I
dictation.
mean, and I've said before, like Walter Mosley has always said that just thinking about writing is writing. It's not like, just the actual, some people think, I think like, when you're actually sitting at the computer and you're actually like your fingers are touching the keyboard, like that is when you're writing. It's like, no,
Mhm.
writing consists of a lot more where
Yeah.
you're at the grocery store and you're
Hmm.
walking the aisles and you're thinking about like a plot point or like maybe like what's the motivation of this character. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I still think that's part of the whole writing process, definitely.
For sure. I always kind of say when it comes to my process, I always say I'm kind of the worst of both worlds. I'm not organized enough to be a plotter, but I'm not creative enough to be a pantser. So I just kind of I've got like a notebook full of like half ideas that like a car chase, but was on a unicycle, or just like things that I kind of think would be cool in the and as I'm going, if I get stuck, I kind of think about like what are like some things I kind of like page through the book. Like what was I thinking? I was like, oh yeah, that would kind of fit in this range. And so then I'll kind of put that in. I also I've used the example of they talk about when if you're lost in the woods, like if you want to get out and you don't want to keep circling, you find a point ahead of you and a point behind you, and you kind of walk to that point. Then you find another point and another point, so you can keep going in a straight line. That's a little bit like what I do. I kind of have like tentpole scenes maybe that I've plotted out in my head, and then it's just kind of connecting those to keep me going. And that's mostly just for the draft, for the first draft, because I draft really sloppy and really ugly.
So it's more like a
I'm
Nora Roberts vomit draft for that first draft, just to get
a
it
little,
out.
yeah, it's definitely just to get it out, but I do feel like I have those tent poles in there where it's like I have the frame. When I'm done, it's definitely the frame of the house.
Yeah, but do you
It's just a
typically at
matter
the
of
start, do you typically know or have an idea how it's going to end, even if that might change?
yes. Not always in the specifics, but like I know it's like this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna, and then it's gonna lead to, kind of like if you were talking about a Marvel movie or something. Like you kind of know like, well, the end's gonna be a big battle of the good guy and the bad guy or something like that. So I may not know exactly, but I'm like, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna, and it's gonna lead these people into conflict that must be resolved somehow, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Um, I want to go back to the bio I read somewhere, I think on your website, where you had also worked as a ticket taker. So you had worked at a movie theater previously?
Yes, yes, we had a
Do you
movie
remember when,
theater.
like, what, like, how old were you when you were working at a movie theater? Because for me, and that was my high school job, high school and college, I worked
Oh, nice.
at a Regal Cinemas.
I worked at the Mills Theater in Lake Mills, Iowa. There's a single screen, uh, late run movie house type thing from what 14 to 16 probably.
A single screen.
Yeah, yeah.
I had worked at a 16 house theater.
No, this is we
I
had
can't even
one.
imagine just how 16 screen. That must have been boring in between sets.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, there was one show a night, so we weren't making a lot of money. You'd only get a couple hours, uh, and you'd see beaches 4 times in a week or something while you're sitting there. Um, but yeah, that was my first job. My dad's cousin owned it, so that's what got me in. But we had these really nice pink bow ties and cummerbunds we had to wear.
Did you
Classy.
learn did you ever were you ever up in the booth? Did you learn how to like thread a projector or anything like
Hmm.
that?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I had worked the booth too, which was great in college and actually after college for a while too, because I would take my laptop and I would just like write in between sets. So I would
Oh,
like have that
sure.
there because usually there would be like that downtime in between the sets.
Oh,
That would be really
well,
good.
and for me, like if you're working the concession stand at a one screen theater, like I mean, there are nights where there's 4 people there. I mean, this is a small town, like 1,500 people in the town. So like on a Wednesday night, yeah, you might have 4 people there, and you'd sell them popcorn and a soda on the way in. That's the last you're gonna see them until it's done for the most part. But you had to be there just in case they popped out.
Like on the weekends, was it packed? I mean, like how many people did the theater seat?
Oh, I mean, it was an old school theater, so a couple hundred. But it always depended on the movie. Like I said though, since it's such a small town, they wouldn't get like the newest whatever coming out. It was usually had been so big movies would bring people in, of course, but a lot of people in town, like they'd already seen Batman because they didn't want to wait 4 weeks. Um, but I mean, on a weekend you'd get 50 people maybe.
Yeah.
Depends on like, sometimes it was a huge event movie kind of a thing, and they would have a big thing, or they'd run some kind of deal, or they'd have the Lions Club giving out free tickets or something like that. It would be a big deal. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't busy.
Yeah, in the town where I had gone to college, they had a single run. And it was mostly just an art house. They did a lot of more
Hmm.
independent films, and I knew the guy who would run it. And sometimes I would just go in and just talk to him. Like if I was around, and we would just chit chat. But it wasn't a big like obviously theater, so it wasn't like like at a multiplex where they have like the big like a lot of the different popcorn machines. So it was like just one
Right.
little machine. And I remember like when he would make popcorn, he just like it was like this brick of butter. He would just drop in the thing.
Yeah, it's
But it was very very good. Very 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 good popcorn.
mhm.
So anyway, let's move on. Before we get to the new book which just came out yesterday, which by the way, I forgot to ask. Do you happen to have a copy with you?
I do. You want to see it?
Well, well, sure, of course.
You'd think I'd have been more prepared.
I forgot to ask when we were in the green room. It completely slipped my mind.
That's
So,
okay.
all right, there it is, Silent Creek. I want to say that for last though, but
Sure.
do hold on to that. Do hold on to
Will
that.
do.
I want to talk about Jeff Circle.
Hmm.
Um, he put together this anthology called Myopic Duplicity, I believe it's called.
Yep.
Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yep.
Can you talk? Yeah, and I guess you have a story in that. Can you talk a little bit about that story? And also, like, have you done a lot of recent short stories, or was this something that when he approached you about it, you were, like I guess like, were you hesitant at first, or like how'd that come about?
I definitely was because I do not have much short story or short fiction experience at all. But a couple like a year or two ago, I was at a book event up in Minneapolis, and I was sitting by, I don't know if you know Josh Moling, does the Ben Packer mystery series. Great writer. But we were just sitting there talking, and he got approached uh, by someone, I believe it was Terry Bischoff, who used to be at Crooked Lane, um, who worked at the bookstore up there, and she came up and was talking to him about a potential anthology. And it sounded, I was listening to him talk, it sounded really cool, but then I realized like, man, if someone asked me about something like that, I'd have to say no because I don't do short fiction. I should start working on that and start figuring it out. And I was like, even kind of looked up a few, like they have a short fiction class at Loft Literary up in Minneapolis that they do via Zoom because I'm down here in Rochester. I was like, ooh, it had already started for that semester or segment or whatever you want to call it. I was like, I might look into that, do that because I don't want to throw away an opportunity if just because I don't have any experience. Then, of course, before I can do any of that, Jeff contacts me and he tells me about this anthology he's doing, and he's like, "I got to get you in." And I was like, "Oh, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't feel like I have the experience. You should let somebody else do it." And he was very persistent. Um, and then I finally talked to a few friends, and I talked to my agent about it, and I was basically looking for someone to tell me no, don't, it's fine. Don't do it. Yeah, you're good. But my agent was basically like, no, no, it's a great opportunity. You should do it. I was like, well, I don't. She's like, no, you're fine. It'll be a good experience. You'll be fine. So did it. And it was a lot of fun. My story, so the whole myopic duplicity thing was supposed, the prompt we got was basically, do the ends ever justify the means? And around that time, I happened to be at this new liquor store in Rochester. It's one of those. It's a chain at the national chain. I'm blank on the name. It's with wine and something, but they had a case, a glass case of like their premium stuff, and I was just kind of glancing through it for fun. And oh, here's a $400 bottle of scotch, and here's a whoa, there's $1,000 bottle of tequila, that kind of stuff. And right in the middle, they had a bottle of scotch, a 40-year-old age scotch for $15,000. And I saw that, and I was just like, I even saw the manager was like, tell me about this bottle. Like 15,000. We're in Rochester, Minnesota. Like how like this is just like for people to come in and look at, right? Like this is some kind of like attention grabber thing. And he's like, oh no, like he's like, we don't sell it, but like our store up in Milwaukee, we sell one of these every so and I'm just like, I couldn't even wrap my brain around it. Um, and that was also right around the time where Joanne Fabrics uh, was closed, and they got bought up by private equity and shut down. And it just kind of the dichotomy of like these poor old ladies losing their jobs at the sewing store versus like people going in and buying $15,000 a bottle of liquor. I kind of thought like, what would a person like? Because I literally thought like, what would a person who just lost their job think about seeing someone buy this? And that gave me the idea for the story. Basically, this this old lady Jolene sees it and realizes, you know what? I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna take that, just so no one else can have it because fuck them. Sorry, screw them, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, so with shorts fiction, it almost seems like the shorter you get with the stories, the more, I mean, even with the novel, really, ideally every word matters. But usually with
Mhm.
a novel, you can have a few missteps here and there. I mean,
Sure.
it's a very long, it's like 300, 400 pages. With a short story, you really have to try to make things as tidy as possible. So, how long did this end up being? Did you end up having to, like, your first draft, did you end up having to cut it back, or did you have to expand? I mean, like, because again, the experience is a little bit different than when you're sitting down and writing a novel.
Absolutely. So our word count, these are pretty long for short stories. Our word count was 8,000 was kind of the target they wanted us to hit. So it was definitely longer than some of the short stories you see. But like me not having that experience, I don't think it was much of a problem because I didn't have anything to base it on, I guess. But you are absolutely right that it is such a different muscle than writing a novel. And that muscle was weak for me. Like I said, every word, even in 8,000, every word has to, every scene has to not just move the story forward, but it has to really mean something. You don't get any filler. And it was tough. I came in when I started writing it, I first realized at about 4,000 words that I was going to go way over. Like what I had kind of plotted out in my head was there's no way I was gonna finish it, wrap it up in 4,000 words. So I actually stopped and then kind of like reevaluated what I wanted to do and how I was gonna tell the story and cut a bunch of things out. And uh, then when I kind of started over again, I kept maybe the first 1,000 or so. Then I kind of took a different fork in the road. But then I was that path. I was like, God, I'm worried I'm going to come up a little short here. Um, so I had to. I didn't pad it, but I was like, I got to add some meaningful stuff to this to get to the finish line, and I think I did. I added kind of some not postscript scenes, but I was like, well, it doesn't have to end here. Let's see a little. Let's show a little bit of the aftermath of what she does, and that was actually ended up being the most fun stuff to write. So
Yeah. And again, what's the title of the story?
it's called Drink the Rich.
Very nice. Drink the Rich. And that's in the it's available right now, I believe, as an audiobook and an ebook, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Myopic Duplicity,
Hmm.
edited by Jeff Circle. So okay, everyone needs to check that out. So all right, well, let's get to the main event. Let's talk hold up that book again. Silent Creek, really cool cover. Speaking of which, you've had at least your Thomas and Mercer covers have been really solid. How much feedback, like, is that something where when
Hmm.
the designer has to come in and it's pretty close, or like, are you doing a lot of back and forth with them before we get to the thing that most readers see?
Yeah, they do, I've had a good experience cover wise with them, especially because they've let me have a good amount of input with it. They're I also understand I'm not a designer, so like I don't give them like a this is what I want to see.
Right.
We have a big pre-publication packet that covers all kinds of stuff from audiobook stuff to cover stuff. But like the cover section is, they ask like, about main characters, locations, are there objects that feature like strongly in your book? Like for Just Stay Away, they had the croquet mallet on the front, all that kind of stuff. And then they kind of go and do their thing. And, months later, I'll get an email like, here's a cover. What do you think? And they've been really good about giving me feedback. Uh, all the covers I've had, especially the first two, Just Stay Away and Pike Island, I really liked the concept of both of them, but they both had kind of one major flaw in them. Like for example, Pike Island, which is about a abandoned house uh, in the middle of this heavily wooded island in the middle of a lake that nobody knows is there, that's been abandoned for 30 years. Um, they had a picture of the island, but you could see the house with like a little light on and all, stuff. And I said, like, this looks great as a cover, but it's going to confuse readers because the whole point of the story is this island is fully wooded to the water. You cannot see this cabin, and that's the whole point is like nobody knows it's there. And it's based on a real place actually. So I said, you're gonna have to change that. And they're like, okay, they went back to the designer. Less than a week later, I had another one in my inbox. I'm like, yep, perfect, nailed it. So they've been very good about that kind of stuff. For Silent Creek, they actually gave us two completely different. That was the one time where I actually gave them a little bit of direction before. I was like, well, what if you did something like this, and this? And they gave us two completely different options. There was the one that I'd kind of described to them, and then there was the one that we went with because the one that we went with was much better than what I'd asked for. So basically, my editor, my agent are all like, "Yeah, we like option two," and I was kind of like, "Yeah, that's the I'm comfortable saying that. That's a much better option." So that was pretty much known. That was about. I don't think we did any real changes on that one. It was just picking between the two, and it was ready to roll from the get.
And what about at least the last three books you published, including this one? How title wise, is this were they the titles that you had come up with, or was it one of those things where like after the fact the publisher was like, yeah, that's nice, but no, we're gonna go with something else.
So I consider myself horrible at coming up with titles, and I ended up coming up with a title for every one of these books. So I don't know. Like for Silent Creek was actually when we announced it, it was so I do working titles. Like the
Yeah.
working title for Silent Creek was Hoops McCann after the John Cusack character in One Crazy Summer because he was a basketball player and my main character was a basketball player. So like I have working my file names are not are, so I don't even think of titles until it's done. And then we went through talked with my agent and my editor. The three of us kind of brainstorming. They're like, "Well, we'd like to do a place title, so like we can just do the name of the town or something." I said, "Fine," um, and it was Silent Springs, which, unbeknownst to me, is a very famous book about eagles from the 70s. It's like a conservationist book. I'd never heard of it. I was totally ignorant of it. So, I mean, it got announced in Publishers Weekly as Silent Springs, and everyone I talked to was like, "Oh, it's like the Eagle book." Like, no, it's not like the Eagle book. So I email my agent, my editor. I'm like, "Hey, we may have a problem here." Um, and apparently, there's this book, this conservation book, with the same title like the 70s, and like everyone I've mentioned it to has brought it up to me. So can we change it? And basically, my editor said, if you come up with something better, sure. So basically, I kind of like Minnesota towns a lot of times are a description and a noun, like Silent Creek, Red Rock Springs, Red Wing, like just all kind. So I made a list of like every kind of silent, whispering, babbling, white, red, like all these like describer words, and then it was all like bluffs, pines, springs, mills, whatever. And I just said, pick one from this column and one from the other column, and we're good. And we were like, how about Silent Creek? I'm like, perfect. So that's how Silent Creek got its name.
I almost thought you said you were gonna then cut them up and then put them in like a bowl and then just kind of like pick out.
I mean, hey, I'm if it would have got the job done, I'd have done it.
So all right, well let's talk about Silent Creek. What can you tell us about this new book?
So it is it's a story of a small town, like hometown hero basketball player who uh goes off to college, is expected to be the next great huge thing. He's the big hope from this little town, everybody's hero. Uh he goes off to the University of Minnesota to play basketball, has a horrific knee accident, knee injury his freshman year, and it kills his career. So he tries to leave basketball behind, had a very complicated relationship with his father, leaves his hometown behind, doesn't want anything to do with his past, basically. Then his dad dies, and he comes home to the funeral. And while he's there, he realizes that his mother is showing signs of dementia, early onset dementia. So he realizes he's got to stick around to take care of her, take care of the family business, all that stuff. And it starts with him navigating being the hero that left and not really wanting to live that life again. And then to spice things up, we add a former rival from the past, like kind of his childhood bully that's still around and is really not happy to have him back. And then, as we say, hilarity ensues.
Um, did you like when you were sitting down to write this, again, the same idea, did you really have an idea of like how it was going to end or like, I mean, again, like I guess I guess my question is, do you typically start with just like a main character or just the kind of a general plot or like what is that first thing that because again, writing a book is it takes a lot of time.
Sure.
I guess unless you're Nora Roberts, where you could probably knock one out in like a week or two. But like, it's going to be at least several months of work.
Yes.
So, what's the thing that really got you to be like, okay, this is going to be what becomes Silent Creek?
My books all tend to be mostly kind of plot or situation focused, and because they all kind of involve regular people. Not like, I don't do cops, I don't do detectives. They're all just kind of people get thrown into a bad situation. So I always have like the situation and stuff or the plot, the nugget of it, the hook of the book, and then I kind of write around that. Silent Silent Creek came from uh, just some I is an amalgamation of stories from my own experience playing high school basketball in a small town, and then seeing other like seeing what like hometown worship can be. Not from me, but just like and people wanting to kind of get away from that kind of stuff. So I kind of brought those together. It was a tricky book to write. I actually started writing it years ago, and I got probably 45, 50,000 words in and ran into a wall and ended up trunking it for a while. Uh, I just could not. The choices I've made up to that point, I couldn't see a path forward, so I put it away. And then we actually submitted a different book to be this, book number three with Thomas Mercer. But kind of going back to the timing thing we were talking about earlier, they had put out something similar earlier this year, or that it was at the time scheduled for earlier this year, so they didn't want to do that. So they're basically like, "What else do you have?" And I kind of went to the notebook full of ideas and I pitched them a few things, and they were like, "No, no, no." And finally, my agent said, "Like, well, what about the you guys like that small town vibe from Tony. What about this small town basketball book thing, stalker book that he has?" And they were like, "Oh, that sounds great." And I'm kind of panicking, like, "Well, yeah, I put that away for a reason. I couldn't think of an ending." Uh, and my agent, being the supportive woman she is like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll think of something." And I had a good week after after we signed, after we sold it. I had a good week of panic where I was just sitting in front of the computer, being like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I'm like telling my wife, don't spend the advance. We're gonna have to give it back. Uh, so eventually, I remember I was sitting there one morning at the coffee shop where I always write, and I just had nothing. I couldn't think of it. So I said, you know what? Heck with this. I closed up shop, and I'm like, I'm going on a bike ride. And like 10 miles in, I kind of had an idea. I was like, well, wait a minute. What if, we kind of back up and instead of going this way, we go this way? Maybe that opens up a few things. And then as I kept riding, I was like, ooh, then we could do this. Ooh, we do that, then we can do that. Suddenly it's like, ooh, that might be some fertile ground there. So as soon as I got home, I kind of sketched out a few, wrote down all these like nuggets of ideas I had picked up, and from then on, it went pretty quick. It was a good detour for sure.
Yeah. Again, writing is not necessarily sitting down and writing. It's thinking about things. It's coming up with different plot points, or if you're
Hmm.
stuck, just I don't know. In the past, I've I found that. Well, now I we have an electric mower, so usually I just have some earphones on and I listen like an
Mm-hmm.
audiobook, usually when I'm mowing. But previously, it was more like the gas one was really loud, and that was just kind of stuck in my head. You usually always thinking about like the certain book I was working on, and
Yeah.
sometimes that helps. Just getting lost in your head with coming up stuff. So, all right, well, with the time remaining, so the new book again, if you want to hold it up again, Silent Creek, people to see. There it is. That's out now in ebook, paperback, audiobook, narrated by Luke Daniels. For people who are audiobook fans, Luke
Mhm.
is a really strong narrator. So, in the time remaining, is there anything that you've read recently, watched, listened to that you would recommend that you really enjoyed?
So right now I'm kind of tying to the short story thing. I'm reading that End of the World as We Know It, the stories from The Stand,
Yeah, I got a
which
copy here
th
somewhere.
yeah, that I mean, The Stand was one of my all-time favorite books. It was one of the it's the first of the giant Stephen King books I got into when I was young. So I always loved that story, and just the lineup of writers that they got for that thing was just, outrageous. So it's been really fun to uh to get in there and kind of get back into that world. It's really cool. I'm really digging it.
Good. When what about like watching? Have you seen any good movies, TV shows, anything recently?
Well, speaking of Stephen King, I went and saw the last movie I saw was The Long Walk,
Hmm.
which I thought they did a good job with. They kind of hit all the same emotional beats with that story. Uh, they did a really good job. I'm trying to think. We've been in a little bit of a rut of TV shows lately. We haven't, found anything that's been really great. I think we're watching Only Murders in the Building at this point. It's one of my daughter's
Yeah.
favorites. She loves that, and it's
I,
fun, but it's
I
not
feel
like
like they can
groundbreaking.
end that show now. I feel like
It
it's kind of
Yeah,
the last episode, or at least the one last week. At one point, I said to my wife, "I'm like, why are they still doing this show?"
yeah.
It was
It
that one
we
where Martin Short takes God, his wife Meryl Streep into like the
mhm.
theater and starts talking about when he was like a kid. It's
Yes.
like, what are we doing here?
I mean, it's one of those where like you've got Steve Martin, Martin Short. Like you can put them in. It'll never be terrible because they're just great. But yeah, I don't think that show is going to be breaking any new ground anytime soon.
Yeah, it just feels like, the first couple seasons were really good. Now it's starting to kind of drag out, which
Mm.
sometimes happens with shows.
Yep.
If you haven't seen it or watched it yet, the Slow Horses is always great. The new season, the new
Yes.
episode, this week, I watched that last night. It's such a great show. Gary Oldman is just
Hmm.
he is hilarious in the show. And at one point, he did a thing with like a fart, and I said to my
Yeah.
wife, I said, "That man won an Academy Award."
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But
And that
he's
I
great.
love seeing people like that in roles like that too. Just like, that's like, yeah, that's just awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, all right, Tony, I know you got to go. I don't want to keep up much more of your time. So, again, the new book is called Silent Creek. The author is Tony Wirt. Of course, he has other books you can find on Amazon, including his, I guess, what would we call it, a middle grade or young adult book?
It's middle grade. Like I said, I kind of wrote it for my daughter and she was in like second grade. So, but I did slip in a lot of jokes for having read a lot of books to my kids when they were little. I did appreciate the little snarky joke that the parent can appreciate. So I did put some of that stuff in there too.
Very good. So, all right. Oh, and then if people want to stalk you online, where can they find you?
I'm mostly active on Instagram at Wirter, Wirter. It's my old high school basketball nickname. I do have like a Facebook account, but I'm not there very often. And Blue Sky at Tony at TonyWirt.com.
All right. And your website?
TonyWirt.com.
Oh,
Yep.
TonyWork.com. Completely blank
Yep.
there. I thought Blue Sky was Tony Work. Oh, that's right,
That's well, I got
Blue
yeah.
Sky gives you that option of doing
Yes.
your username as your website, which I
Hmm.
still don't know how I feel about it, but it just looks kind of weird, I guess.
Yeah.
But
It's a little unwieldy, but
anyway, all right, Tony, thanks so much for making time. And again, everyone go check out all of Tony's books. And yeah, we'll see everybody next time. Bye.
thank you, sir.